Dorothy Stratten, a woman born in British Columbia, Canada, whose beauty could have captivated any man's soul. Her beauty even led her to grace the pages of Playboy magazine. Her life was working out in such a way that she could have even been the next superstar. That was until she was ended by the man that was supposed to love her until the end of time. This is the story of Dorothy Stratten. This is Night Owl. Good day, all. I'm Ted, your host, and welcome back to Night Owl. Our story today is going to take us all the way back to 1980. But before we get too deep into that, if you could do me a favor and hit like and subscribe to my channel, as well as sharing this video, because it really will help my channel out. And you may also want to turn on your notifications just so you're kept apprised of all the new videos I come out with. With that out of the way, let's get back into our story. As I said, today we're talking about born Dorothy Ruth Hogg Stratten on February 28th, 1960, to Simon and Nellie Hogg Stratten out at the Grace Maternity Hospital in Vancouver, British Columbia. In 1961, she was joined by John, her new brother, and in 1968, she got to meet her brand new sister named Louise. In 1977, she, of course, attended high school. Most of her friends consider her to be a very sweet and kind person, but she did kind of have a tendency to hang out with the, the party crowd. Now, you gotta understand, I'm not talking about, the jocks or anything like that, just the cool kids. The kids that never wanted to hang around with me in school. Anyway, at the time, she was actually working part-time as well at the local Dairy Queen. And that's when she met a 26-year-old Vancouver area club promoter, as well as a pimp, named Paul Snyder, who began dating her. Wow, I know you ladies are the bad boys, but a pimp, really? I mean, they say the heart wants what the heart wants. Are you sure it wants a guy like him, though? Oh, to each their own, I suppose. Now, sometime later, Paul Snyder had one of his buddies who was a professional photographer take some, nude pictures of Dorothy to send into Playboy magazine during the summer of 1978. But there was a bit of a problem with that. Dorothy's age. She was under the minimum age that you're allowed to do something like that in Canada, which was, and I believe still is, 19. So she had to convince her parents to sign off on the model release form. Now, because these pictures got sent in, Dorothy was actually made a finalist in the 25th anniversary Playmate Hunt, the contest that was sponsored by Playboy magazine. That was in August 1978. A few months later, Paul, in October, came out and joined her and wound up marrying her in June of the following year. It's at this time that Dorothy decided to shorten her name from Hog Stratten to Stratten. Maybe she thought it sounded more commercial, or perhaps less ethnic, I'm not sure. But she did go on to become Playboy's Miss August in 1979. And she began working as a bunny at the Playboy Club in Century City, Los Angeles. Now, Hugh Hefner did definitely not just have an eye for the ladies, but he had an eye for talent. And Dorothy definitely impressed him. He actually thought she could leave modeling behind and become a very good actress. He actually encouraged her to take whatever roles came her way, which she did. She had been in Buck Rogers. She did an episode of Fantasy Island. And she also had small roles, but roles nonetheless, in different films such as Amerification, the roller disco comedy Shakedown, and a lead role in the exploitation film Autumn Born, all of which was released in 1979. But there was a bit of a problem. Now with Dorothy, everyone loved Dorothy. It was actually Paul everyone had a problem with. A lot of Hugh Hefner's employees was coming up to Hugh and saying that isn't there anything he could do about him? That they wanted Hugh to try to warn Dorothy, just, isolate him, just get away from Paul. And it wasn't just the employees at the club and at the magazine. Even Dorothy's friends started having their doubts about Paul. Now, on March 22nd, Dorothy flew off to New York to start work on her fifth and final movie. It was called They All Laughed. It was a romantic comedy co-starring John Riddle. Now, I know you're familiar with that name. He was in movies like The Prom Child, and on TV he was on Three's Company. Such a funny guy. Anyway, she played the romantic interest for the unhappily married John Riddle. This was actually her first substantial role in a big budget movie. Keep in mind, her acting career just started a year before that. But this is also, I believe, when she met a guy named Peter Bogdanovich, who was directing this movie. Now, Peter, who also wrote the screenplay for that movie, said he based Dorothy's character loosely on Dorothy's life, the experience she's had being married to Paul, from what he understood what their marriage was like. Of course, Dorothy and Peter began an affair during the production. Now, you may be wondering, what did anyone have against Paul? Why did no one seem to like him? Well, you see, Dorothy began her 1980 by spending the first 2.5 months completing her Playmate of the Year photo shoot, as well as making a movie, Galaxana, in Southern California. Now that meant all her jobs that she had to do was fairly close to home. So Paul assumed the role of chauffeur, manager, and acting coach. The problem was, Paul, he was always there. And his presence wasn't a help to anyone. I mean, he was so critical of poor Dorothy. And there was arguments with her almost like nonstop. And it was causing Dorothy so much stress that her co-workers at the Playboy Club, as well as on the set of Galaxana, all took notice about how it was affecting her. Now, when she took off to film They All Laughed in New York, Paul actually wanted to go with her. But Dorothy already started seeing that there was issues between the two of them and knew it was going to cause issues on the set. So she just told him, I'm sorry, the director decided to make this a closed set, which means you won't be allowed on. And all you're gonna do is, be able to hang out at the apartment or hotel, whatever, and you just be so bored. So just stay here. It's fine. Which she reluctantly agreed with, but Dorothy also wanted him to not follow out to New York so that she could pursue her relationship with Peter. So, having convinced Paul to stay in Los Angeles, she went out to New York, and once there, her new affair with Peter could truly begin. Now, in April, Dorothy had to go back to Los Angeles to prepare for the upcoming introduction as the new Playmate of the Year and the follow-up publicity tour. Of course, they still had a lot of shooting that they had to do and finalize in New York. But this would also mark the last time that Dorothy actually lived with Paul in their Los Angeles home. On April 30th, old Hugh Hefner held a luncheon on the grounds of the Playboy Mansion where he could present Dorothy Stratten as the new Playmate of the Year for 1980. During his comments, he pointed out that she was from, Canada, and that she also received $200,000 in gifts as well as cash, in addition to, receiving the title of Playmate of the Year. Now, Hugh Hefner continued to say that Dorothy is something very special. And once he was done with his speech, Dorothy took the podium and she, of course, thanked the photographers, the executives, as well as Hugh Hefner, saying that he has made her the happiest girl in the world. Later on that evening, incidentally, she made an appearance on NBC's The Tonight Show, starring Johnny Carson. The very next day, Dorothy took off on a 2-week promotional tour in Canada. she had nothing really planned or scheduled over the first weekend. So she flew back to New York to see Peter. Problem is, it was causing a lot of conflicting emotions within Dorothy. Her feelings for Paul was definitely changing, and she started questioning her whole marriage. And the thing is, her feelings for Peter, they were also increasing a lot. She had even wrote Paul from Canada, asking him if it would be okay for her to have more freedom in their relationship. Now, upon receiving this letter, it did not exactly make Paul's day. And he realized that she's so far away from him right now that he had no control over her, not directly. So he called her, and when he got a hold of her, he went nuts, which unfortunately for this guy is kind of a short trip. He just hollered and he screamed at this poor girl. Now, her tour in Canada was actually supposed to end in Vancouver. She was hoping to, get to see her family and spend some time with them. But at the last minute, old Paul showed up in Vancouver, and he conned her into making a few personal appearances at several of the nightclubs. I guess Paul knew a lot of the owners there. Now, Paul knew all the club owners of the greater Vancouver area, so he was able to negotiate and collect all the cash that Dorothy made for these appearances. And he, of course, pocketed all of it for himself. Now, once they got back to New York, they got in a huge fight, as you can probably imagine. But at some point, Dorothy actually suggested that she could give up acting, and the two of them could just move back to Canada on a permanent basis. To this, Paul said no. It seems he didn't understand the fact that it was Dorothy trying to save their marriage. All he saw was the income that he'd lose. Now, eventually, Paul ended up going back to Los Angeles, and Dorothy was still in New York. But he wound up having a more and more hard time trying to get a hold of Dorothy. Then in late June, a few weeks after their first wedding anniversary, he got another letter from her. In it, she pointed out that they are now separated and that she wanted a divorce. Of course, this letter really upset him, of course, and he had some obvious reactions to it. First, he cleaned out the joint bank account they had. And then he had an affair with an ex-girlfriend of his. And at this time, he was fairly convinced that she was messing around on him with that Peter guy. So he actually hired a private eye to gather all the evidence of that the PI could find on Dorothy cheating on Paul. Now, that did give Snyder a bit of a problem. He was still living in the house that the couple had shared. But because he wasn't American, he was Canadian, and he didn't even have a green card, it's not like he could go and get a job. or anything like that. So he was still relying on Dorothy more or less to foot the bills. And what the money she gave him actually didn't leave it out for any kind of big purchases or anything like that. So what's the guy to do? He started selling off a lot of Dorothy's things to make some quick cash. Stuff like the Playmate of the Year prizes that she had received. And one of the most notable things he sold was her Jaguar sports car that she got from Playboy as a gift. Now, by mid-July, all their work and obligation was completed for They All Laughed, which made them as free as a bird. So, they took a 10-day vacation in England. Then around July 30th, they returned to Los Angeles. Now, at this time, Dorothy's official residence was a newly rented Beverly Hills apartment. But in actuality, she actually moved in with Peter at his mansion in Bel Air. Now, on the night of July 31st, 1980, Paul, now fully aware that his wife, A, was back in Los Angeles, and B, was living with Peter, was a wee bit on the irate side. He actually hid in bushes just outside Peter's estate with a, weapon. His intention was to do injury to pretty much anyone that came out of the house. However, after several hours of inactivity, he grew impatient and bored, and he took off, drove up into the hills overlooking the city, and he had told friends later on that he even had thoughts of, himself. Around noon on August 8th, Paul invited Dorothy over to his house at one point they both shared. Now, it was, of course, several months since the two had seen each other. And Paul's line of thinking was, well, you know what? I was able to convince her to pose in Playboy. I bet you I could convince her to take me back. But it didn't work out as he planned. She confessed to him that she had fallen in love with Peter, and she wanted to finalize their separation. Now, a rejected Paul Snyder did agree to meet Dorothy the following week sometime to discuss monetary settlements. Later on that afternoon, though, Paul had to return that weapon I mentioned to its actual owner. I guess he had just borrowed it. But he was almost obsessed with getting a second one. Now, on August 9th, the day after he met with Dorothy, him and his detective buddy went to a local gun shop. He was hoping to purchase one, but he was told he couldn't because of his status. He was from Canada, not America, and he had no green card or anything like that. So he could not legally purchase one. So he turned to his buddy, the private detective, and asked him to buy one, to which he refused. Now, next time he saw his buddy, the detective, Paul asked him again about a firearm. This time he said he wanted to buy a machine gun for, home defense. However, the detective, who did show he was a true buddy, talked him out of it. Now, on August 11th, Paul, not one to give up that easily, drove out to San Fernando Valley to look at a weapon that he saw advertised for sale. But he wasn't able to find the place, so eventually he just gave up and went home. Then on August 13th, 1980, which ironically was the second anniversary of Dorothy Stratten arriving in Los Angeles, Paul did have a bit of luck. He was able to buy a weapon that he saw advertised in the newspaper. And later on, he'd be chatting with some of his friends, and he'd tell them about the purchase he just made of the weapon, and he declared that he was going to take up hunting. And during his conversations, Paul would actually casually bring up the subject of other playmates that had passed away prematurely. He actually spoke about one that passed on because of an auto accident about a year before this. Her name was Claudia Jennings, who was an actress and former playmate of the year, just like Dorothy was. Now, Dorothy showed up for a meeting with Paul as planned over at Paul's place. She had actually spent the morning talking to her business manager, mostly about what kind of rental settlement should they offer Paul that would be nice and fair and whatnot when it comes to the house. I believe they settled on $1,100 because it was later on found there by law enforcement. Now, just before she took off to meet Paul, her business manager did advise her to try to limit how much time she spends with him, because this guy sent off dozens upon dozens of red flags for this business manager. But Dorothy said, well, he is actually kind of being nice about everything, and that she had hopes that her and Paul could still remain friends after this. Now, Snyder actually had 2 roommates, but they had taken off during the morning to do stuff and whatnot. So when Dorothy arrived at Paul's house, the 2 of them were, of course, alone. Now, they believe that they started off talking in the living room. They found Dorothy's purse, which was open, on the couch. But then at some point, the 2 of them went into Paul's bedroom. Now, around 8 p.m., the roommates returned home. They noticed Dorothy's car was in the driveway, And when they got in the house, they saw that Paul's bedroom door was closed. So they thought, maybe they decided to get back together and just wanted some, privacy. So they spent the next several hours just chilling in the living room watching some boob tube. Now, Paul's buddy, the PI, he was actually a little bit worried about his friend. He hadn't heard from him all day. So he called out to the house, and obviously he was only able to get a hold of one of the roommates, but he voiced his concern. So at around 11 o'clock at night, the roommates went into Paul's bedroom, and he found Dorothy and Paul's bodies, both nude, both fell victim to Paul's weapon. Once the police were informed, they quickly were able to determine a timeline. They believe that Paul took out Dorothy about an hour after she arrived. And then about an hour after that, he did himself. Now, sometime after midnight, Paul's detective friend called Hugh Hefner out at the Playboy Mansion to give him the grim news about Dorothy. Hefner, in turn, called Peter to let him know what happened. And I guess once he heard the news, he collapsed. In fact, he was such a rough way, he actually had to be sedated. As for Dorothy's mother, she was informed by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. Now, Dorothy, as per her request, was cremated and then laid to rest at the Westwood Village Memorial Park in Los Angeles. Now, Dorothy didn't just have one movie made about her life, she actually had two of them. The first was made in 1981. It was a TV-made movie called The Death of a Centerfold, the Dorothy Stratten story. In it, Dorothy was portrayed by Jamie Lee Curtis. Now the second one, this one actually went around to the theaters. It was made in 1983. It was called Star 80. And the role of, in that case, Dorothy was played by Mel Hemingway, and the role of Paul was played by Eric Roberts. In 1983, there's this movie critic named Vincent Candy. He gave Dorothy some fairly high praise. He said, Miss Stratten possessed a charming screen presence and might have become a first-rate comedian with time and work. Now, you may be asking yourself, well, how about Peter? I mean, he took her passing so very, very hard. How did he make out? Well, funny you should ask. In 1988, at the age of 49, he married Dorothy's sister, Louise, who was 20 at the time. After Dorothy's passing, he paid for a lot of stuff like modeling classes and her education. Um, they, however, did divorce in 2001 after being married for about 13 years. Think about Dorothy. She actually touched a lot of people. There's a songwriter named Bryan Adams. I'm assuming you probably heard of him. Him, along with a co-writer named Jim Valance, wrote the song "The Best Was Yet to Come," which he put as the last song on Adams' 1983 album, Cuts Like a Knife. And it was dedicated to Dorothy. And he also, Adams that is, actually co-wrote a song with a woman named Lindsay Mitchell, who was a part of the Canadian rock band Rhythm. The track's name was called Cover Girl, and it was on their Greatest Hits album. Think about it, it may have been a Greatest Hits album, but it actually never appeared before. There's another musical group called Bush who wrote a song called Dead Meat that was in her memory. And the Red Hot Chili Peppers also wrote a song called Californication, in which they actually reference Dorothy. Now, was her beauty the only thing she had going for her? Oh, hell no. She was the total package. She was talented, smart, and kind. She had a chance of going all the way to the top of Hollywood. But she wasn't perfect. In fact, she did have one fatal flaw. She was unable to see how evil some people truly were. But I'm more interested in your opinion. Have you ever heard of Dorothy Stratten? Are you a fan of her work, or have you even seen any of her work? Tell me what your opinions are. After all, everybody's opinion is valid. Thanks for coming by. Please don't forget to hit like and subscribe, and to share this video, because it really does help our channel out. And you may also want to turn on your notifications as well, so you'll be kept apprised of any new videos that we have that come out. Once again, thanks for stopping by, and remember, be you good or be you wicked, everybody deserves justice. Good night.